All right, five-star offensive lineman Darius Grey is down to two schools between South Carolina and LSU. We go behind enemy lines and tell you some intel, what we know about LSU and their chances and how they feel about landing the five-star prospect. And will he end up in South Carolina when all is said and done? I make a bold prediction. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. Hope everyone's having a good start to their Thursday morning or whenever you are listening to this show. Thank you for everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode, we're going to get into, I know the last couple episodes we've been talking about more national big picture stuff, but we're going to continue to do a little of that as we get to the end of July. And then once camp starts and August starts, we will get more into focusing on the season, because we are barreling down on the kickoff, less than, I think, 40 days away now. So, anyway, today's episode, we're going to talk about five-star offensive lineman Darius Grey, what it would mean to land him, and then really the latest intel on him as a prospect and how it's pretty much a two-team race, despite what we know. So we're going to talk about that. In the second part of the show, we're going to get into a little bit more of coaching rankings, the latest from CBS, and where Shane Beamer has not landed, but vaulted himself in comparison to last year especially. So that's pretty cool stuff. And then we'll close out the show with some miscellaneous things as well. But five-star prospect Darius Grey. This is a kid that you've been really excited about for a while, because we've talked about the other positions and position units that Carolina has struggled to recruit, quarterback being one of them, and how that's changed under Shane Beamer. And you look at the offensive line, and the offensive line has been the biggest source of struggle you have had over the last 2 years. Now, I don't even think it's close. You can look at other units and say, well, receivers kind of struggle at times. I don't think there's anything else that you could even really bring up. Running back has been great with Rocket Sanders. Special teams is always special teams. The defense has always been really, really good. It doesn't really feel like there's another unit that really compares to this offensive line. You've got 41 sacks into the last 2 seasons. I've said over and over again how frustrating that is, because you've done it with a guy like Spencer Rattler in 1 year, and then you've done it with a guy like Lenore Sellers, who are polar opposite types of quarterbacks. But Darius Grey, a five-star interior offensive lineman, by the way, landing at South Carolina would be a massive deal. I want to go over him as a prospect real quick. Number 16th ranked player in the country, one of the top uncommitted players still left on the board. Most of the board has been picked off, over June and July, but he remains one that has not. This is a kid that took 8 official visits. Okay, now the 8 official visits, I always forget that you're allowed to take more than 5, because they just changed that now. But 8 official visits, and his finalists, right, are Clemson, LSU, Ohio State, Carolina, and Tennessee. Let's start with Clemson. I don't think they're a serious player here, and I also know that they're not going to be a team that's going to come in like Texas or Texas A&M, Michigan last minute, throw in a ton of money. Ohio State, this kid is from Virginia, but I also don't think, even though, I feel like Ohio's close to Virginia, right? Am I getting ahead of my skis here? Either way, Ohio State is not as of right now, a serious player for him to go there. And then there's Tennessee. Tennessee, what they have working against them, a little bit more late to the game in comparison to Beamer and his staff. And then also the 2 teams that he has been vocal about being ahead of the rest are South Carolina and LSU. It is a 2-team race by all means. And I talked to some people over the LSU side of this without them giving too much information, and they feel the same way. It is a 2-team race between South Carolina and LSU. I want to go over what South Carolina has working for it, and then I also want to talk about the things that LSU has working against it as well as working for them, just to kind of just give us an example or give us some understanding of what each team is working with. Carolina has brought in very little elite blue chip offensive linemen over the last several years. I bring up this stat all the time. When Spencer Rattler came in from Oklahoma, he left a team that had 11 four-star or better prospects on the offensive line alone on that depth chart. He came to South Carolina, they had 2. I believe that number, I counted like a few weeks back, it was at 4. And you also feel good about your offensive line. And also, the interior offensive line should be a little bit more experienced and revamped from what you had a year ago. Maybe not experienced because you lost so many snaps at this level, but you went to the portal. You got guys that can play right away and that are physically ready. Darius Grey is 6'3", 285. That's probably not big enough right off the bat to go play on day one if today was day one. Now, keep in mind, he's got a full year, right? He's got a full year. I'm not sure if he's going to be an early enrollee. I would assume so because that's what most people do now. But if he goes early enrollee and he gets in the weight room and he gets all that kind of stuff, I would fully expect him to get to that magic number of 300 where he can compete right off the bat. This is a position unit where now at South Carolina, you've got Josiah Thompson a couple of years back, a 5-star recruit that is just finishing year 1, going into year 2 now. You're hoping, by all means, that you're going to be able to put him right next to Gray. And having that on the left side, you're talking about opening up a run game. You've been talking about like having a quarterback that's not going to be worried about his blind side and be able to drop back and just opens up more and more things on top of the talent you already have brought in at this same position, right? Because you do have talent there. It's just young and it's unproven, and it's a couple guys that are still in the developmental stages of their first year on campus. Now, the things that South Carolina has going for it is just that immediate playing time, right? Like this is a kid you would expect. Now they're not going to hand him a starting job, but you would expect a 5-star player at this position with the way we've seen this offensive line. This is no disrespecting the players that are currently there, but you would expect him to be able to start day one. Josiah Thompson did, and the way you have set up that position and just from a track record, even though it's a very small sample size, you would expect him to be able to go there on day one and be a starter. LSU, on the other hand, when you look at what they have to offer, the NIL packages that we've been told are about the same. That's a big deal because I've said this before, and it's nothing that like South Carolina wants to get. South Carolina does not want to get into an NIL bidding war with anybody. If there's a player they want to keep and retain, because the retention is becoming more and more part of the game, and people are starting to realize that. If it's retention, sure, go out and spend 2.7 on Lenoris. Go out and spend 1.5 on Dylan Stewart. That's fine. You've set the market for those positions, or for especially for the defensive end, and now you have set a precedent of what you want to do when players are here. So if you come in and earn it, you've already shown like you are more than willing to spend. But spending money out of high school has become more and more of something that is frowned upon. And not something that like most coaches are going to do. Kirby Smart, he's been very vocal about this. Like, I know he's thrown out some money in the NIL game for high school recruits, but going out and spending over $1 million on a high school recruit is not something that a lot of good coaches are going to do. There's some that have the deep pockets, like Texas and Texas A&M, they'll do it, but that's not going to be the case in South Carolina. And at LSU, it would be the case, but you've already sent out so much money. And LSU has spent so much money on this class that they had coming in from the portal, and then also what they've already spent in this class for next year. Lamar Brown is a 5-star. He was listed as an offensive lineman originally. He's now listed as an athlete. He's like a top 10 player nationally. He's from University Lab, which if you're familiar with Baton Rouge, is down the street. It is in the backyard of LSU. That kid landing, even though they don't play the same position, or they're not supposed to or projected to, that's a lot of money that you were going to throw at towards a player with NIL. I want to go back to South Carolina for a second. You talk about when Josiah Thompson came here on campus, he was the highest ranked player in terms of NIL valuation going into last season. I don't know if you remember this episode, but we talked about this from On3. He was the highest ranked player in terms of NIL valuation on the South Carolina roster. It was $390,000. That was it. That's changed, right? And a lot can change every year. And now you have the house settlement, and you have more money coming in, and all that kind of stuff. But I don't expect South Carolina to throw over $1 million at Darius Grey. I don't expect them to. They might, I don't expect them to. Keep in mind, you're going to have some money cleared up going into next year as long as if Lenore's ends up going pro. You're going to have other players, though, you're going to have to retain and maybe renegotiate and also go get in the portal. So this is not going to be something where you're trying to overspend on one player, especially at this position. Now, I don't know how, but we've already gone 10 minutes on this topic. So when we come back, we're going to continue talking about it, about what I know from behind the scenes over at LSU, and also what works most in South Carolina's favor for this recruitment. And I'll give you a bold prediction on where I think he ends up, and also when that announcement's coming. Before we do, and before we go to break, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends at FanDuel. Listen, summer sports, they're in full swing. And whether you are all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. If you're already following the action, why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned on the beach. And I tell you what, I've been using FanDuel. You can track your favorite matchups. The app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and things you can get, just bonus money and fun ways to bet. It's also the fastest and easiest way to pay out and get the money back in your pocket as quickly as possible. I'll tell you what, whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I am part of the action, and I love every second of it. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, when we come back, we're going to continue talking about Darius Grey. Maybe it'll be a little bit more short-winded this time. I don't know. Also get into some head coaching rankings from CBS and the latest going on with national media days and what people are saying about South Carolina and the SEC. Locked on Gamecocks continues right after this. All right, so back at it here. So the Darius Grey thing. I think that when you talk about from a recruiting standpoint, obviously Lonnie Teasley is handling his recruiting here at South Carolina. Brad Davis is handling his recruiting at LSU, and he is a very good recruiter for one, and also one of the better offensive line coaches, at least he's regarded as in the conference. Now, a lot of it has to do with the fact that last year they had 4 offensive linemen that were all either seniors or, in Will Campbell's case, a high level draft pick. And he's got a story to tell. Like he has a good narrative and story to tell and paint to recruits. They had, I think, Will Campbell last year, who was I believe he's a top 5 pick overall. I think he went 4 to the Patriots. He was incredible. 3-year starter from Louisiana, like one of the favorites on that team and fan base. He was the first LSU offensive lineman to go in the first round of an NFL draft since 1998, which seems shocking. If you think about how much talent they've had on that roster across the board, he's the first rounder they have had in 27 years. Now, I feel like we're a little bit lucky here, and just hear me out. The best offensive line coach, in my opinion, in the country is at Clemson. It's Matt Luke, the former head coach at Ole Miss, former offensive line coach at Georgia. You've seen Georgia's offensive line kind of take a step back over the last couple of years. That's because Matt Luke is now at Clemson. You've also now seen Clemson's offensive line take a step forward. I remember doing a show here not that long ago, before the Clemson game last year, talking about the most underutilized and underdeveloped position, maybe of any team in the country, was Clemson's offensive line. Because you think about how well they recruit and how well they've played, especially against the talent they go up against in the ACC. And for them to not have a single first-round draft pick under Dabo, and the highest-ranked draft pick was, I think, a second-rounder. I believe they only landed 1 5-star during that entire time, too, at that position, from, his first year to, 2022. Anyway, not having to compete with him is a big deal, so hopefully that continues on. But going back to LSU, they do have a story to tell. I mean, they had 4 players off that offensive line drafted off last year's team and making it into the NFL. That's a great story, and that's ultimately what the end goal is for most of these prospects, right? So there could also be playing time there. And now they went into the portal and got a bunch of guys to replace them. They also have some good younger players that they've been able to recruit. Carius Kern is a 5-star from last year's class that they flipped from, I believe, no, they didn't flip. They flipped Solomon Thomas. But they 5-star from last year's class, and then they have another 5-star that they were able to flip from Florida State, and both of them are freshmen on this year's roster. Having to replace 4 offensive linemen tells you you've got a chance for playing time right away. But the thing working most in South Carolina's favor is that LSU has gone all in on this year. LSU has gone all in on this year, trying to get back into a national championship contention. And Brian Kelly knows it, because he knows that if he starts the way he does, or even finishes the way he did last year, he's going to be in trouble and he's going to be in the hot seat. Now, the number for his buyout is way too high. Like, they're not going to. I don't think they're going to send him packing unless it's a disastrous season. But last year, when they lost Bryce Underwood, the number 1 quarterback in the country, number 1 overall player in the country, they had around $7 million allocated to his NIL alone, and he leaves to go to Michigan because they give him $12 million in the 11th hour. All that money they had, they now are cash rich and can go into the portal and buy up as many great players as possible, and that's what they did. And one of the things that we will see, you've seen Ole Miss do it. That's kind of their MO now. It's not high school recruiting as much. It's that, and going into the portal and bringing in seasoned veterans that can start day one. LSU is not going to be able to overspend with what they have NIL-wise. They're not tapped by any means, but I can tell you without a shred of doubt, they don't want to have all of that, like the $20.5 million they have from the house settlement. They don't want to have 75% of that going to just football like most places. They want to have a good amount plus their collective and be able to raise money. Brian Kelly, there's a reason why he donated $1 million of his own money to NIL last year to that collection, or to that collective. But they are not going to overspend. They can't afford to. And going out and getting a player that's not from Louisiana, and it's also a guy that's probably not going to start for them day one, is not going to be a priority. Now, they might go out and spend, especially if they need to save face, if Kelly needs to get a big-time recruit come in after a rough start. But if the NIL packages are the same and the opportunities are the same, even though they would favor South Carolina, the relationships is what it would come down to. And I think that a kid from Virginia, you don't see a ton of kids from Virginia going all the way down to Baton Rouge. Now, it's a great place. It's an incredible environment and all that kind of stuff. But for a kid like this, where everything money-wise is at an even point, right, for South Carolina and LSU, it would make the most sense, in my opinion, and I'm biased here, obviously, that as long as the relationships are good, and as long as you can pitch to this kid, listen, you can start day one and start for 3 years, right? Also, you're going to be able to play in an offense that has the number 1 quarterback in the country for Landon Duckworth coming in. You're going to have guys like Nick Harbor, as long as he doesn't go pro, and like all this like bevy of talent coming in around you. And by the way, we've been able to develop kids that are ranked much lower than you coming out of high school and turn them into day 1, day 2 NFL draft picks. So if you can tell that story, yeah, it's awesome that LSU last year was able to have a really good offensive line. But all of those players are gone, and you have already spent a ton in the NIL game to go replace them. And here's the other thing too. Now, this is kind of a double-edged sword because it's similar to South Carolina, but both of these states, South Carolina and LSU, going into 2027 have a bumper crop of talent in state for recruiting. One like one of the best classes in state that both states have seen in a really long time. And you can really make the case for LSU and Louisiana. That's 26 and 2027. Now, there's also like LSU. One of their biggest MOs as a program is putting up a fence around that state. You've seen Beamer try to do the same around here. The talent in Louisiana, there's just more of it than there is in the state of South Carolina. And again, from an NIL perspective, and a just spots on the roster and spots that you can bring in and sign, and spaces that are going to be available for recruits, you're not going to ever turn down a 5-star. But you look at what they have in state of Louisiana next year, and I believe it's like 6 of the top 100 or 5 of the top 100 are from the state of Louisiana. including one of the quarterbacks. I cannot remember his name now. He goes to a school that starts with D. He goes to Testrahan. Hold on. It's a quarterback. He's one of the top 5 players in the country. All right, I was off a little bit. The Dunham School, Elijah Haven. He is the number 1 player in the country right now for the 2027 class. He's a quarterback, and that is a kid that is from Baton Rouge that you probably cannot let out of your backyard. So my point in all that is saying you got 5 kids in the state of Louisiana in the top 100 as of right now. You got 3 from the state of South Carolina, which feels like a record, to be honest. Like that's still a lot. You got a kid from Rock Hill that is like around 90 something. I believe a defensive back. You have another kid from Irmo that's a 4-star, ranked 52nd in the country. Right now is a edge rusher, Jaden Bryant, which is obviously a big deal. And then you obviously have the kid that everyone keeps talking about, and that's Joshua Dobson, the kid from Fort Mill, South Carolina, 5-star, top 10 player in the country. You're going to want to give that kid, obviously, a substantial NIL package. But even the positions, there's going to be more money that LSU needs to allocate for this year and next year based off the talent they have in-state, that losing a kid like Darius Grey, a interior offensive lineman, which is not a position that garners a ton of gotta have and necessity, right? It's important, but it's not tackle, it's not edge, it's not quarterback, it's not receiver, it's nothing like that. So I think if you want to go out and get this kid, you have every chance in the world to do it. And I think they will. I think they will. I think that the story that they will be able to tell, even though it's not the same or not as impressive in terms of getting kids at that position to the NFL right now, the story being able to tell that kid, listen, you can start day 1. You get to play for one of the best cultures in this not only this conference but in the country, and play for Shane Beamer, play under Mike Shula, all this stuff, and you're going to be surrounded by more and more talent, and you can tell the story of what they're building in the state of South Carolina and in specifically in Columbia, South Carolina. That's a powerful story. So I don't know when he is going to announce. He has no decision date set as of right now. You hope it's sooner rather than later, because as these things go into December, that's when people get desperate and start throwing around a lot of money. That's when you might see a team like Ohio State come in at the last second, or Tennessee or something like that. But as of today, you got to feel good if you're South Carolina. You have to feel really good on it. And again, I'm biased, but I think he ends up at South Carolina. And based off of everything that I hear from LSU, it is, he's important, but it's not to the same level of important, imperative, and necessity that South Carolina would have for a kid like this. And I'm sure that they will make that known when they are recruiting him for the rest of the way before he signs or has his announcement. So the 10-minute segment on Darius Grey lasted 23 minutes, of course, but we had some good intel, obviously, from a little bit behind the scenes over on the LSU side. I wanted to make sure I could share it with you guys, and it's exciting stuff. When we come back, we're going to talk briefly about the new CBS head coaching rankings and how high Shane Beamer has risen from last year to this year. Locked on Gamecocks starts right after this, or continues. All right, finishing up the first of 2 episodes today, and I hope you guys are having a great day. This has been a fun off season. I'm glad that it picked up. Baseball obviously was a ton of letdown for most of the baseball season. They're doing very well in the portal. Also, several players doing really well in summer ball, which is awesome that you're able to keep up with that now. It's crazy the level of visibility that college baseball has gotten. Not to make myself sound old, but since I played, and it's awesome to watch. So being able to watch games in the Cape, and then Northwoods, and then Coastal Plains, and all that kind of stuff, it's been really cool. But back to football, because we are just counting down the days till kickoff. CBS released their SEC head coach rankings, and they had about something similar to what I had when I did mine a couple weeks back, and I showed you guys. And I'll go through them real quick, but it's 1 is Kirby, which I think we'd all agree. 2 is Sarkisian. 3 is Brian Kelly. Kalen DeBoer is 4th. Lane Kiffin is 5th. Josh Heupel 6th. Eli Drinkwitz 7, Shane Beamer 8. We'll round out. We'll come back. Elko is at 9. Mark Stoops at 10. Dropped all the way from 6, where he was a season ago. Billy Napier at 11. Hugh Freeze at 12. Brent Venables at 13. Clark Lee at 14. Sam Pittman at 15. Jeff Levy at 16. So from last year to this year, not a lot of change, especially at the bottom. Venables went from 11 to 13. Clark Lee went from 15 to 14. Pittman went from 14 to 15. Levy stayed at 16. Hugh Freeze drops from 10 to 12. Napier jumps from 13 to 11. And then you start seeing some, like Elko stayed the same at 9. Stoops dropped 4 spots from 6 to 10. And then we go back to Beamer, who was at 12 last year. He was the 12th best head coach in the conference. Now, the interesting part of this is this. He didn't get any kind of gimme spots to go up to 8th this year. There's in a absolute rarity, there was no turnover at the head coaching position from last year to this year in the SEC. I don't expect that to be the same this year. I don't remember the last time there were 2 years in a row where that even happened. But Beamer, a little tidbit they have about him, has won more games than any coach in program history over its first 4 seasons, including topping Steve Spurrier by 1. That came in last year's regular season finale at Clemson, his second win in the last 3 years against the Gamecocks' arch rival. With that level of production, Beamer's going to have this job in Columbia as long as he wants it, and believes South Carolina can get to a conference title and playoff appearance under his watch. Here's the thing. We're a year removed from people outside of this program, this city, and this fan base just being adamant as could be that he was on the hot seat. One of the most ridiculous things, because I remember this right as I took over this the show and hearing from, coming from like more of like a national or big picture like SEC stuff. That was like, yeah, of course, Beamer's on the hot seat. And then you talk to anybody close to the program, and it was like, no, he's not. At all, and clearly he wasn't. So moving up from 12 to 8, it kind of shows me a couple of things. One, it's about time to put some respect on Beamer's name, and two, I don't think that they had a good grasp of who he was a year ago, and maybe it's just because they solely based him as the 12th best coach based off of underperforming in 2023. Fine. There are numbers that could back it up. Like, we talk about this all the time. Like his 2-10 in SEC road games before last season, and there's still a ways to go in what he needs to do in terms of like to solidify himself, and show that it's not just a 1 year, blip, right? And then disappoint the next year, but him being able to elevate not just where their standards are, but where the floor is of this program has been awesome to watch, and I think it's about time people start taking note of that. I don't have a problem with him being 8th in the country. I don't. I have a problem with him being ranked 8th in the SEC. I don't. I have a problem with him being 28th in the country. If you want to say he's behind Eli Drinkwitz, there's a case to be made for that, because Drinkwitz and Mizzou dominated this rivalry up until last year, and Carolina was able to pull that one out even in the final minutes. You talk about Heupel. Heupel, I think, is one of the more underrated coaches in the country, not just the conference. He's one of 3 coaches in this conference that has a winning record against ranked opponents, along with Kirby and Kalen DeBoer. Kiffin, sure, only one really big win in the regular season since he's been there. Hasn't been great against like top tier opponents, even though he was able to beat Georgia last year. But 3 10-win seasons in the last 4 years, it's a great job. And also, he dominated us last year. So, Kalen DeBoer at 4, I agree with that. I'm surprised you could make the case he should be ahead of Kelly. He's 4, but has a record of 4-0 against every coach that's currently listed above him. Sark at 2. Sark is a great offensive mind. He's been a great head coach, obviously, at Texas. He's also has a lot of resources. He's like the opposite of Mark Stoops. Like he's just had a ton of resources. And then Kirby obviously at 1. Here's my thing though. When you talk about that in the SEC, I'm fine with Beamer being 8th. It's kind of like the recruiting rankings, because those recruiting rankings are like stacked, where you could be, we talk about all the time, 10th in the SEC and you're still a top 20 class nationally. But to rank Beamer 28th feels like a little bit ridiculous. Having him behind Rhett Lashley, He's behind Kenny Dillingham. That's kind of shocking because Kenny Dillingham's got he's 12. Jeff Brom at Louisville. That also feels like a little bit of a stretch. Lance Leopold at Kansas is still getting he's living off everything he did at Buffalo, but him being 15 after they went 5-7 a year ago. And there's everyone above them. You could make the case. I get it. Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell being top 10 seems a little bit ridiculous. Lincoln Riley. I have no qualms with any of that, but ranking in the Power 4 head coaches, and he is 28th out of 68, and is somehow behind PJ Fleck at Minnesota. It's the person that's right in front of him. It seems a bit ridiculous. And it feels like, again, we are grading people on a curve, and that curve never seems to apply to South Carolina or Shane Beamer. So it's preseason rankings. It's a dumb list. We're all going to overreact to it. I will, at least. But that's my take on it. And I will also say that the best way to put that to rest and continue to climb up those rankings, which don't matter, but it is nice to be taken seriously, is keep winning. Keep winning. And South Carolina has a really good chance to do that this year. All right, that is all for the first of 2 episodes today on Thursday, July 24th. And we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will be back for more. Until then, go Cox.